The rain fell hard that evening in downtown Chicago, the kind of cold drizzle that seeps into the bones and makes even the brightest city lights look blurred and distant. A young woman stood at the entrance of a high-end restaurant, her second-hand coat clinging to her shoulders, her worn shoes already damp. Her name was Emily Carter, and for weeks she had been gathering every last dollar she could to experience something she had never known in her 26 years of life. What it felt like to sit at a place where people were treated with dignity and respect, not just rushed through like shadows at a fast food counter. For her, this dinner was supposed to be more than just food. It was a symbol of hope, a small celebration that she had managed to land a steady part-time job after months of rejections, and she wanted to remind herself that life could still hold beauty, even for someone like her. But as Emily stepped inside, clutching her thrifted handbag, she immediately felt the stares. The restaurant was full of elegant coats, designer dresses, and polished shoes that clicked confidently on the marble floor. She tried to smile, but the hostess's eyes narrowed in quiet judgment before she even reached the desk. When Emily softly asked for a table for one, the hostess leaned closer, her lips curling into something between pity and contempt, and told her in a sharp whisper that the restaurant was fully booked. But Emily could see with her own eyes, rows of empty tables gleaming under the chandelier lights, perfectly set and waiting. She felt the heat rising to her face, a mixture of humiliation and disbelief, as a couple behind her was immediately led to a table without even needing a reservation. Her throat tightened. Her fingers fumbled as she pulled out the crumpled bills she had saved. She whispered again, desperate, telling the hostess she didn't mind waiting, that she just wanted a chance to sit down. But the woman's smile was cold, her voice firmer this time, telling her she should try somewhere else more suitable. Every word was a dagger. Emily could feel the eyes of other diners grazing her like sharp glass, some with amusement, others with discomfort. She wanted the ground to open beneath her so she wouldn't have to stand there another second. And when the hostess finally turned her back on her, Emily felt utterly invisible. Friends, before I take you further, if you believe in kindness and second chances, and in stories that remind us of the goodness still left in the world, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Your support helps us spread light where the world often feels dark. Emily turned, ready to escape into the rain, her chest tight with shame. But just as she reached for the heavy glass door, a calm voice broke through the noise of clinking glasses and laughter. The room fell oddly quiet as a tall man in a tailored black suit stood up from one of the central tables. His presence was commanding yet gentle, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He walked toward her with steady steps, the polished floor reflecting his every move. The hostess stiffened, suddenly nervous, and Emily froze, uncertain of what was about to happen. The man reached her, his expression kind yet serious, and without hesitation, he pulled out a chair from a nearby empty table and gestured toward it. "This seat," he said warmly, "is meant for you." For a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. She had no idea who he was, but the way the entire restaurant shifted at his words made it clear. This was no ordinary customer. She sat slowly, her hands trembling, while whispers moved through the room. The hostess paled, rushing forward as if to explain, but the man raised his hand slightly, and she stopped in her tracks. What Emily didn't know was that the man was Alexander Hayes, one of the most respected CEOs in Chicago, the owner of the very chain of restaurants where she had just been rejected. To the world, he was a business magnate, a billionaire with power and influence. But to Emily, in that moment, he was simply the only person who had seen her as human when others had dismissed her as less. As Emily sat there, stunned, the waiters who moments earlier had avoided her suddenly scrambled to bring menus and water, their faces flustered with shame. She stared down at the tablecloth, fighting tears, wishing she could vanish. But Alexander sat across from her, his voice gentle, asking her name, asking if she was okay. Slowly, the wall she had built around her heart cracked. She told him she had come here not for extravagance, but because she wanted to remember what dignity felt like. She confessed how hard life had been, losing her parents young, working 2 jobs, and yet constantly being reminded she didn't belong in places like this. Alexander listened, really listened, without interruption. His eyes didn't carry pity, only respect. And then, in front of the entire restaurant, he asked the staff to serve her their finest meal, not as charity, but as a guest worthy of their very best. The dinner that followed was unlike anything Emily had ever known. The flavors, the warmth, the quiet dignity of being treated as someone who mattered, it all wove in her heart like threads of healing. She could hardly taste through her tears, but every bite felt like a reminder that she was more than the sum of her struggles. Alexander didn't dominate the moment with stories of his success. Instead, he spoke of resilience, of times when he too had been underestimated, when he had walked into rooms where people thought he didn't belong. He told her that sometimes the greatest power a person can hold is to rise above judgment and treat others with grace, no matter their appearance. Word of the moment spread beyond that restaurant. Some diners secretly recorded the scene, and within days, Emily's story was being shared across social media. Strangers reached out to her with messages of encouragement, offering job opportunities, kindness, and community. But beyond all the noise of the internet, the memory that lived deepest in her was not the attention. It was that single chair being pulled out for her when the world had tried to shut her out. In the weeks that followed, Emily's life began to shift. The part-time job she had barely clung to turned into a full-time opportunity after her manager saw the viral video and realized the resilience of the woman he had in his team. She slowly began to rebuild her confidence, walking with her head a little higher, daring to dream a little bigger. And through it all, she held on to Alexander's words, that dignity is not given by others, but carried within. Months later, she returned to the same restaurant. This time, not in desperation, but with a steady step and a bright smile. The same hostess who had once turned her away looked at her with embarrassment, remembering who she was. But Emily didn't hold grudges. She simply requested a table, and when she sat down, she smiled, knowing that no rejection could ever define her again. And perhaps most beautifully, she discovered that Alexander Hayes wasn't just a fleeting figure in her story. He had continued to check in on her, quietly, without fanfare, offering mentorship and encouragement. For him, it had never been about publicity or appearances. It was about doing the right thing when it mattered most. That one act of kindness had built a bridge that would last far beyond a single night. By the end of her journey, Emily learned a truth many of us forget, that rejection, while painful, can sometimes lead us to the very moments that change everything. And that kindness, especially from those in positions of power, has the ability to restore hope in ways words never fully can. If this story touched your heart, friends, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who may need encouragement today, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Your support keeps these messages of compassion alive and reaching people who may desperately need them. And before we end, I have a special request. Comment below with the words, "Kindness can change a life," so we can fill this space with reminders of what truly matters. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't wealth, fame, or status that defined this story. It was a chair pulled out for someone who was hurting, and the reminder that every person deserves to be seen, respected, and valued.